Now, before we looked at the case of Bosch versus Denmark. Now, some of the comments asked me, right, so who is liable? Is it the old company or is it the new company? Now, the court did not really distinguish that, okay? Now, according to the court, it doesn't matter whether you sue the old one or the new one, because the company, all right, the principle here is, right, the company waiting the name to be changed is nevertheless still a company on itself. Okay, so it was the company who entered into the contract, not the promoter. Okay, and they did not distinguish whether it was the old company who was liable or the newly named company that was liable. And according to the court, that really didn't make a difference, because it was nevertheless a company. The company already existed. Make sense? Now, what about for a shelf company? Now, this was illustrated in a New Zealand case called Cross versus Aurora Group Limited. Now, what happened here was someone called Mr. Cross. He made a contract on behalf of, quote, Cross Property Management Limited, a company currently being formed. Okay? That's exactly what he said on the contract. Okay? So he made the contract on behalf of, quote, Cross Property Management Limited, a company currently being formed. Full stop. And then he bought a shell company, in other words, company off the shelf, okay, which was in existence at the time. And for some reason, he changed its name to Cross Properties Management Limited, okay? P-R-O-P-E-R-T-I-E-S, Properties Management Limited. Okay, it was called Cross Property, P-R-O-P-E-R-T-Y Management Limited. And for some reason, okay, when he bought the shelf company, he changed the name to Properties, P-R-O-P-E-R-T-I-E-S, Management Limited. So the question before the court was, right, could this new company adopt the contract? Now, according to the court, no. Because according to the court, this was not the company Mr. Cross was purporting to act for, because it had already been formed under the contract when it was made. Now, because Cross Properties, okay, the company which he bought off the shelf, was already a company. So in other words, it already had the legal capacity to enter into the contract. Make sense? Which means the newly established Cross Property, P-R-O-P-E-R-T-Y, Management Limited, could not rectify that contract. Now, what if you contract with the company and you mistaken its name? Or you thought you were contracting with this company, but in fact you were contracting with that company. Now, this was illustrated in a case called Badger Hill Properties versus Cotterell. Now, what happened in this company, for some interesting reason, the company used two trading names for different aspects of its business. Now, it displayed its registered name on its business stationery, so on papers, pencils, but did not do so accurately. Okay, so it should be, okay, the true name, okay, should be Badger Hill Properties, plural, limited. But they display on its stationery, Badger Hill Property, singular, limited. Now, to cut a long story short, what happened was, okay, subsequently, okay, there was a contractual dispute between the seller, the supplier, and the company. And the question before the court was, right, is the company liable, or is the promoter of the company personally liable? Now, what the seller argued was, right, she had either contracted with the company's agent personally, by the promoter, or that she had contracted with a non-existent company. Now, because if the company is non-existent, okay, it would mean that the promoter of the company would be personally liable based on the principle of personal liability. So the question here is, right, did you contract with Badger Hill Property, singular, or Badger Hill Properties, limited, plural? Now, because property, singular, did not exist. Although on the company stationery, okay, it often referred the company to Badger Hill Property, singular, limited. So who do you think is liable? The promoter or the company? Or do you think that makes a difference whether you contracted with Badger Hill Properties and Badger Hill Property Limited? Now, what the court held was, right, the court of appeal held that the evidence on the facts revealed that the contracting party was always the company and not the promoter. And the reason for that, because the company, despite the fact that it was called Badger Hill Properties Limited, has always held itself out as Badger Hill Property Limited. Now, because on their company stationery, for example, on their papers, pens, pencil, okay, it was referred to as Property Limited, despite the fact that it was in the registered name, okay, it was Properties Limited. So, according to the court, if you hold yourself out on your stationery as Badger Hill Property, P-R-O-P-E-R-T-Y, okay, then we'll treat you, okay, as if you have held yourself out as that company name. But because what the court asked was, right, if there was a mistake on your company stationery, why did not you rectify that? Now, another situation is what we call the Cotronic situation, which was named after the case Cotronic. This is the zoning. Now, what happened in this case was, okay, the facts is pretty much complicated, but what happened was, in about 1986, okay, the company was the intended contracting party, yet it really did not exist at the time. Okay? In 1986, the company was the intended contracting party, and it did not exist at the time. So, on prima facie, okay, the contract was a nullity, was invalid because it didn't exist. Okay, so on prima facie, the contract was null. Now, also, based on the complicated facts, okay, it could not be a pre-incorporation contract because in 1986, no one had thought of forming a new company. Now, to cut a long story short, what happened was, right, the service provider provided some service work. And the question before the court was, right, who is liable? The promoter on the principle of personal liability or the company? Now, because what the company argues, right, this could not be a pre-incorporation contract because back in 1986, okay, we never thought of forming a company. So what they argued was that person who acted on their behalf was acting on a personal capacity. Now, what the court held was, right, given the fact that the service provider had provided the service, okay, given the fact that the service provider had provided the service, okay, he was therefore entitled to damages on a quantum merit basis. Now, basically what this case, okay, the biggest criticism about this case is, right, is that the biggest criticism is that the principle of personal liability, okay, can sometimes be very unfair to the promoters. Now, because as we mentioned earlier, right, a promoter, okay, despite the fact that the company has rectified the contract, can still be held personally liable. Because as a promoter, right, even if the company has chosen to rectify the contract, you are still personally liable. Because under Kellner versus Baxter, we said that mere rectification of the contract by the company does not resolve the liability of the promoter. So the principle of personal liability, okay, can sometimes be very unfair to the promoter. Now, but the next question you ask yourself is, right, so how does rectification take place? Well, we said that as a promoter, okay, you could be relieved of liability, okay, if the company chooses to rectify the contract and replaces themselves in the form of a novation. So the next question you ask yourself is, right, so how can a company be rectified? How can a company rectify a pre-incorporation contract? What kind of conducts or actions is equivalent to rectification? Now, of course, the company can explicitly say, we rectify it. So they can have a board resolution to rectify that, okay, an explicit rectification. Now, it could even rectify it by an implied conduct or implied words. Now, this was illustrated in the Hong Kong case called Poon Yi Kam versus New Paradigm. Now, what happened in this case was, there was a company originally called IVRS. Okay, there was a company called IVRS, and shareholders of IVRS in 1999 discussed plans to expand the business operation. And then they decided that they would set up another company called New Paradigm. And this new company would serve as a subsidiary of IDRS. Now, at the time when New Paradigm was set up, it was incorporated with a view to either get the company publicly listed or to attract external funding into New Paradigm from strategic shareholders. Okay, so either this new company, New Paradigm, okay, it would either go public, so raise capital in the open market, or we would try to attract external funding into New Paradigm from strategic shareholders. Now, what happened was, in order to attract prominent management people to join the new company, Mr. Lai, who was the director of IDRS and also the promoter, proposed to the shareholders that an option should be made available to key management staff to either buy up to 8% of New Paradigm shares. So in other words, to attract talent to the company, it proposed that any new talent joining the new company, New Paradigm, can purchase up to 8% of the company's shares. So share option, okay? And the kind of long story short, what happened was, the scheme was approved on that basis. And Mr. Lai then approached Ms. Poon and invited her to join the new company as a senior executive. Now, by a letter of employment dated 1st of November 1999, signed by the promoter, Mr. Lai, on behalf of New Paradigm, Ms. Poon, the plaintiff here, was offered a position in New Paradigm, and the company was officially incorporated on 24th of November 1999. Okay, so in other words, the employment agreement was entered into 1st of November 1999 between Ms. Poon and the promoter, and it was 24 days later, 24th of November 1999, that the company was officially set up. So there was a gap period of about 23 and 24 days between the signing of the employment agreement with Ms. Poon and officially incorporating the company. Now, the current long story short, what happened was, Ms. Poon later exercised her right to buy the shares, right? Because it was offered, he could buy the shares up to 8% of company shares. So she chose to exercise her right to buy the shares, but subsequently she complained that New Paradigm failed to issue her the share certificate. And by about 2001 and 2002, Ms. Poon had already resigned from the company. Now, the issue before the court here was, right, had New Paradigm, the newly set up company, had the company rectified Ms. Poon's right to the share option after it was duly incorporated. Okay, the issue here before the court was, right, had New Paradigm, the company, rectified Ms. Poon's right to the share option after it was duly incorporated on the 24th of November 1999. So yes, someone, in this case promoter, Ms. Lai, the managing director, entered into that contract, employment contract with Ms. Poon 1st of November 1999. The company set up 24th of November 1999. So the question is, had the newly established company, after 24th November 1999, hadn't rectified Ms. Poon's share option under the employment contract. Now, according to the court, based on the fact, the evidence as to rectification, quote, was overwhelming, okay? According to the facts, okay, the court said the evidence as to rectification was, quote, overwhelming. So what actions or what words equates rectification? As I said, right, explicit rectification, definitely. But what if there is no explicit rectification? Now what the court said was, right, a company can still rectify a pre-incorporation contract either by words or conduct. Okay, a company can still rectify a pre-incorporation contract implicitly either by words or conduct. Now, because what happened was, in the facts, right, after the company was set up, okay, Ms. Poon has already worked there for 2 years, or 3 years. Now, if the company, okay, did not like the deal entered into on 1st of November 1999, they could have informed Ms. Poon that they were not going to give her the share option. Because the facts turn out that, right, Ms. Poon has already, after the company was set up, she worked for them for at least 2 or 3 years, before she actually left the company in about 2001 or 2002. So by conduct, according to the court, right, the rectification was overwhelming. In other words, what the court's saying is, if you did not like the deal, why did you keep her in the company for 2 or 3 years afterwards? Now, another case where implied rectification was illustrated was an Australian case called Aztec versus Atlanta Aerospace. Now, what the court said in this case was, right, implied rectification arises, okay, implied rectification arises where the company acts or omits to act in a manner that is only explicable by acceptance of the contract as itself. Okay? Where the company acts or omits to act in a manner that is only explicable by an acceptance of the contract as itself. So such conduct, okay, may be an act of the company itself, or someone who has the authority of the company. Now, because in this case, what happened was, right, there was only one shareholder and one director of the company. Okay? In other words, that person, okay, had the authority to rectify it, either by words or by conduct. So in other words, if the company has a lot of shareholders, a lot of directors, then yes, implied rectification might be a more difficult to prove. But as in this case where the company only has one shareholder and one director, okay, then implied rectification is easier to prove, either by words or by conduct. So for example, right, after the company is set up, the company chooses to accept the service or uses the service, as in Poon versus New Paradigm, right? Ms. Poon, after the company was set up, worked for the company for at least 2 or 3 years before she left. So that's clear evidence, okay, that the company has chose to rectify for her service. Now, in the New Zealand case called Development Finance of New Zealand versus Mashari, it was also held that the alleged act of rectification must be referable to a conscious decision to rectify. In other words, it must have the capacity to rectify. Now here, right, the issue was whether a pre-incorporation debenture contract was rectified where the alleged act of rectification was registration of a debenture pursuant to a legislative requirement. So in other words, what happened was here, the company, they issued a bond, debenture, to someone before the company was properly set up, before it was registered. So the issue here before the court was, is that bond or that debenture agreement rectifiable by the company? Now, because in order to set up a bond, as we'll look at later, right, when a company issues you a bond or debenture, that debenture or bond has to be registered. Now, but if the company does not even exist, then the question is, how do you actually register that bond or debenture? So, the issue, according to the court, right, in order to determine that is, you look to the wording, the conduct of the agreement, and see if the company intended it to be rectified after it was set up. Now, so for example, right, if the contract says the company would rectify the debenture or the bond, subject to satisfying legislative requirements. So for example, subject to you registering the bond. Now let's suppose if you sign the debenture agreement before the company was set up, and it says subject to legislative requirement, in other words, subject to you registering the bond. But what if you forgot to register the bond after the company was set up? Is the company still bound? No. Okay, because the contract says, right, subject to legislative requirement. In other words, subject to you registering the bond. And if you choose not to register the bond, after the company is duly incorporated or duly set up, the company is not liable for it. Now, because commercially that makes sense, right? The company creates a bond or issues you a bond before the company was set up. Now, commercially speaking, right, it makes sense because a bond has to be registered. Under company law, if a company issues you a get, okay, that has to be registered. And it is for policy reason, what the court said was right. For policy reason, a bond can only be valid if it is duly registered. Now, if for some reason, right, if the bondholder, after the company is set up, forgot to register it, then you can't go back to the company and try to assert the terms of the bond because it is not registered. Does that make sense? Now in abstract, okay, they also discuss, well, what do we mean by express rectification? What is express rectification? Now what happened here was, right, there was a term in the contract, in the pre-incorporation contract, which says, no contract if AZ failed to register or did not rectify within 60 days of the contract date. And however, Atlantic Aerospace gave an oral promise to extend the deadline. And subsequently what happened was, AZ alleged that there was a breach of contract, And AA's defense was the oral promise was not part of the original pre-incorporation contract. So the issue here before the court was, right, was the oral promise, okay, was the oral promise part of the contract or not? Right, orally, okay, they said that they would extend the deadline. But later they said no. So here the issue was, right, is oral promise part of the contract? Now what the court said was, right, express rectification occurs when the company by, quote, unequivocal language or conduct acknowledges that it is a party to the contract. Express rectification occurs when the company, by unequivocal language or conduct, acknowledges that it is a party to the contract. Now, as in contract, well, you would know that, right? Is oral promise part of the contract? Is it? Someone makes a contract with you orally. Is that a contract? Yes. Okay? So if you by words, okay, tell someone that this is part of the contract, okay, then it is a contract, which means that is rectifiable, can be rectified. So even if that term, okay, is not in writing in the contract, if you have made a promise to someone orally by word, okay, that is still valid as part of the contract, which means it can be rectified. Right, any questions in relation to what we've discussed today? Okay, see you all next week. Thank you very much.